itself. I just wanted to ask you, what do you say to people that there's always this generalized stigma, not really a stigma, but you know what I mean? Some people just look negatively on chiropractic. We talked about this earlier.
Right.
I personally think it's because the market is oversaturated and some bad chiropractors might give the profession as a whole a bad name. But what do you say to people who are on the fence, and how do you bring them in?
Well, that's a good question. It's funny you say that, because a lot of, there's like a certain demographic. So it's usually dads who work really hard and don't want to go see any doctor. So it's usually when they come into our office, it's usually because a wife made them come. And so when they're there, they're like, oh, nothing's wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with me. I'm like, okay, that's fine. The first time I meet somebody, it's usually an hour long. We go through an intake, and then we also do an exam. And so what I find during that time is when we get more deeper into their health history, they start realizing things that they have never said out loud. And I'm like, well, how long have you had this? And they're like, I don't know, like 30 years. And I'm like, you never thought about getting it looked at? And he's like, well, no, I'm so used to not having to put my arms above my head. I'm like, you're too young. Like, you should be able to do that. And so I guess it takes them a minute to realize that. And then, so then we start with the exam. So I look at their range of motion and I'm like, you should be able to do this much and you can't. And so, and I always leave it up to them. Like, it's up to you. If you would like me to adjust you, this is what chiropractic is. There's different forms of adjusting. Some people don't like hearing any cracking sounds. That's what an activator is really good for. Yeah. So there are some people who hate having their neck turned around or anything. Totally understandable.
Yeah.
But there are different ways of adjusting. So I think if you present people with options, they can, because what do we all do? We Google everything, right?
Yeah.
So if I say something, oh yeah, I use the activator. I've had people call back into the office, say, what is that tool that they use that sounds like a stapler? Because they're Googling to find articles.
Is that gun?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so I always let them know it's an activator. Just go on their website. There's lots of articles there. And, there's a lot of research to show what it does. And so I find just giving options, I feel like it's a lot better. They can make their own decisions. At the end of the day, they got to do what's best for them. And so also I feel I've had this comment a few times too, where it's like, when I came in, I thought you were going to be a middle-aged man. And I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not. They're like, oh, okay. They're like, it's just, usually like they're kind of grumpy. I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe that's one or two you've gone to, but not everyone is very grumpy. So I feel like the more information you give, it depends how they want to take it. So I never like to force people into anything. I do tell them the benefits of chiropractic. And of course, our consent form also talks about, some of the risks that you hear of. Sometimes, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you might hear a rib pop, right? And so ribs heal naturally by themselves. You can't really do too much about that. Same with some of your toes. You can't really fix that either. You got to wait for it to heal by itself unless it's really, really badly displaced. So, when we go over it, we outline everything and they have questions or they can ask me. It's all great. But
that's good. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
I just want to mention, that's where healthcare is moving, all about patient-centered care, working with the patient to come up with a plan that is the best for them.
Right.
So giving all those options. So what is your opinion on this?
Okay.
No, you don't like self-adjusters?
No, I don't. And I think
Sorry, I had to do
no,
that.
it's all
You're
good.
like, ugh, cringe.
I feel like it's always the younger generation who does it. But there's also, I've had this happen, and I'm sure other chiropractors